Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Club Entrepreneur Podcast, where we interview experts on our campus involved in entrepreneurship. I'm your co-host, Maggie.
Hello everyone, I'm your second co-host Madhav, and today we have with us Alvin, who's an entrepreneur, influencer, and soon to be graduate with us. Hello Alvin.
Hello, everybody.
So, first, let's talk about what got you inspired into becoming an entrepreneur. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
I think being part of the whole entrepreneurship community and getting into entrepreneurship is more about wanting to create something for yourself, figuring out that there are other non-conventional ways to go after things, and then sort of just diving after and pursuing your passions, I think.
Yeah, I think that's pretty interesting, especially, we're all, we need that inspiration to get us started. So, what's the biggest thing that you've, learned so far through your entire journey as an entrepreneur here on campus? It could be like personal development, as you grow. Tell us about your beginning.
I think one of the biggest things that I've learned is to not be afraid of failure and also to dive after your fears almost. Going after your sort of things that seem to be outside of your comfort zone, things that you may be scared of, and realizing that everybody starts somewhere and that not being good at something then is not an excuse to not go after and try something new.
Awesome. So, could you share with us some of your entrepreneurial projects, startups that you have worked on, and when did you start doing it? Was it after you started your college?
Yeah, so pretty early on, when I was a kid, I was very hands-on. I worked on little projects, made sort of origami and sold it in elementary school, and then I fixed different people's iPhones and then made some money off of that, flipping things, buying and selling and that sort of thing. Coming to college, it wasn't until after, I guess, joining the entrepreneurship club that I started looking into startups and doing these competitions, figuring that there was more than just the small business route, I think.
Interesting. So, how many startups have you, worked on?
I think primarily I would say 5, starting from, I guess, beginning of my college career till now.
Wow, so you have a lot of experience with that. So talk to us about your first startup project and kind of just the process of having that. Whether it's the funding or just the development of that idea in the first place.
I think some of the earlier ones came out of the entrepreneurship club through ULaunch actually, through some of these competitions that the entrepreneurship club provided, and then also seeing that UMass gives a lot of funding towards undergraduate students, now up to over $100,000 a year just for student startups, which is absolutely incredible, seeing the numbers grow every year. And it kind of inspired me to go after and try and compete in these competitions. So I started out doing, one of the earlier ones was called Farm. It was a medication management device that I had worked on with a friend of mine that I also met through the club, a Jen, and we ended up working on it, and it was pretty good. I pitched it at a lot of different conferences and events, and it was sort of a good start into a lot of things, I guess.
Yeah, for our viewers, ULaunch is a competition that's organized by UMass Entrepreneurship Club on campus. It's organized every semester where students form teams, pitch startup ideas, and get funding for that. So it's a every semester competition. So, Alvin, what was the time when did you start off you mentioned you did you sold origami and fixed iPhones and stuff like that, but what was the one project or startup when you actually felt like you started off your entrepreneurship journey as an entrepreneur, where you weren't doing things just for just as your hobby, but you actually wanted to start off something big?
I think a lot of the entrepreneurship and these sort of soft skills that are built up through other things, through almost any hobby that you have, sort of started in with, I guess, a sort of influencer journey that I tried to bring myself through. So when I was growing up, I was always intrigued about how people saw online sort of followings as important. And it was interesting to me how some people were able to monetize that, people were able to create careers out of it, and that in its essence is almost a form of entrepreneurship by just diving after something and then seeing where it goes. So I really wanted to learn a lot about that. So I made an Instagram account and then sort of just put my own hobbies onto it, and then started out by just creating content, networking with others, and then growing it, learning a lot about social media marketing, and then slowly over time, I grew a following, I guess.
Yeah, that's really good. Because social media it's huge within our current generation, and growing as an entrepreneur, you already had kind of that mindset, since as a child, and you really took that, you honed that skill, and you brought that, not only to social media, but through your other startups and your other personal ventures as well. So, talk to us a little bit more about your process. Like, what are the different things, the different, obstacles that you had to overcome with these different startups, with these different pitch competitions? How have you changed?
I would definitely say I've changed a lot through my entrepreneurial process till now. Earlier on, so I used to be a mechanical engineering major, and I used to like to do everything on my own. I would solo projects. I didn't like group work as much because other people's ideas were kind of like not quite exactly the same as mine, so then I didn't want to like let that detract from anything, and I wanted everything to be part of my own vision, and I wasn't really able to express that as well. And I did well. I competed in a lot of competitions. I didn't win most of them, but it wasn't until I started working with some really, really amazing teams that I started finding like actual more success in winning a couple competitions, going on that sort of streak. And then with startups as well, it was not until I had a good team of people that I was working with until we started being able to pick things up.
Yeah, I guess that's the real value of like going to these competitions. I guess more than winning, you just like get this opportunity of working with teams, and that's the main value out of it. But I just wanted to learn more about the influencer industry, like in a sense, like we've seen like all this even teenagers and a lot of people who have their like Instagram accounts or YouTube accounts doing blogs and stuff like that. Like I just want to know more about the influencer industry and how it's been growing, and like how do like people get started and stuff like that.
Yeah, so I guess I almost lucked out by starting in the influencer industry pretty early on. This must have been like 6 or 7, maybe 8 years ago. So it was before the term like influencer was really even like coined, and people didn't really express it as that. And famous people or not famous people was just kind of the line, and there wasn't really a major difference between like people thought of like celebrities, which are like A-list kind of everybody knows type things, but then having like a micro influencers and people where lots of people know, but you're not really going to be recognized around kind of in a way, wasn't really something that a lot of people had heard or seen of, I guess. So going into it, it was more getting like a large number of followers sort of somehow converted into demanding some sort of respect out of you. You gain some admiration from people, and on top of that, you also were able to work with brands that were interested in trying to leverage this sort of influence that you might have in order to help them generate revenue. So going along those lines, that's sort of where it started out.
That's really interesting. So you actually, you got on that trend before anyone else did, and by pioneering that, you really were able to get the most out of it. So you took that opportunity, seeing it just as like a hobby thing, and you really ran with that. So that's pretty interesting. So taking it from that social media aspect and turning it over to entrepreneurship side. So did you kind of know, as you were working on social media and stuff, that you kind of had that entrepreneurship mindset, or like when did you coin that term for yourself?
I guess I never really thought of considering myself an entrepreneur, really. I really was just going after something that really intrigued me. The idea that, I guess, putting stuff that you enjoyed out there online and then being able to network and grow yourself was a way to sort of get a lot of people to view your work and to be able to provide an impact through sharing all of those things. And then also earlier on, there was this thing called the 1,000 True Fans sort of concept for influencers, which was that if you were able to have the 1,000 true fans, then you're able to pretty much just focus on whatever it is that you're interested in, and then you'd be set basically for life as long as you pursued that. So the definition or idea behind it is each person, each one of your like true fans, I guess, would be willing to spend / like support you up to like $100 a year, which is less than like $10 a month. It could be like $7 or $8 a month, and it could be in the form of buying your music, buying your apparel, buying some sort of thing or some sort of subscription model or anything along those lines, just anything to be able to like support or donate towards the creator that they cared for. And 1,000 is a number that's not like too hard to reach if you think about it, but that ends up being over $100,000, which is more than what somebody would need to be able to just sort of pursue that.
Interesting. So, like you've mentioned, like how there are either like this A-listers who are like big celebrities who have a lot of followers, but then there are other people who have like the specific skills that people follow them for, or something interesting topic or something like that. But then, just for someone who's like you, like interested in like going out and networking and becoming an influencer, what was the a thing that made you feel like you can gain followers from like just updating your like profile, or like what were the things that made you feel like, okay, you can gain followers by doing this on your account?
I think I gamified it. It was just really like a little bit of a competition for me. It was more like, ooh, how high can I get? And it especially was like motivating because like I've never really been like famous, I guess. I didn't really have any skills or talents that were crazy. But you don't need that in order to get to a certain place, I guess. Like obviously that helps and that could be great, but alongside that, there's a lot of people that are much more talented that aren't heard. And that's just kind of the nature of how things go. So learning almost the rules of the game, I guess, seeing how the algorithms work, what to best place yourselves, how to form different groups, sort of content cross promote with by networking and forming these like influencer pods and those kind of things back then was a way to sort of launch yourself forwards.
So it was kind of a mixture of, luck, but also opportunities that you opened for yourself, which I actually think is pretty interesting because that kind of ties in, being an entrepreneur and opening those doors for yourself, those different opportunities. So talk to us a little bit more about how you did that for yourself.
Definitely with the whole luck thing, I think luck can be created, and it's about how many potential opportunities you allow to, like, for yourself, I guess. So part of it was I had to network and reach out to hundreds of different like accounts, other people, see what other people are doing, look at what was going right, what was not going right, and in between this, I guess I was picking up some entrepreneurial skills without realizing it, but at the same time figuring out how to leverage and give value to other like potentially slightly larger accounts that they could also in turn sort of boost you up a little bit. So I was doing partnerships almost every week with another influencer or person or brand pretty much for a while, and that helped grow a lot.
I guess this shows the importance of networking, and just like not only in the influencer industry, but also like pretty much everywhere. Like, how do you think like the networking gives rise to all these opportunities where like you not only get to partner with people, but also you come across this new avenues to learn stuff and also find out these new opportunities? And you've mentioned like how going to competitions, working in groups, meeting people, like how important do you think not only in influencer industry but also overall entrepreneurship, almost every specific field, networking is so important?
I think networking is one of the most important things because you can't do it on your own. That's the thing about entrepreneurship, is that you become a storyteller and you become somebody that's able to unite other people towards your shared vision that you're able to express. So with that, and being able to find other talented people, the idea is that you're able to provide them in some sort of value where you're differentiated from everybody else in the group. So that way you're able to make yourself stand out, even if you may feel like you're not quite up to par with everybody else. You always have something that you can offer somebody that you can help them with that would greatly sort of ease their life, solve a problem for them, and then in turn it will just come back to you in the long run.
So differentiating yourself, how did you do that? Was it like kind of an internal thing where, you kind of focused on what you could do differently for your personality, or was it more just like, what you had to offer, like when you talked to them, like whether it was through like your business or something?
I think differentiating yourself is a major part of entrepreneurship because you're basically providing your unique value proposition, more in like the business sense, and also The first step is definitely to reach out to and get into as many of these different groups as you can. So joining anything that you can think of, and then just meeting a lot of different people in there, seeing what their different strengths are, what they could potentially do, what their potential is like, if they were guided or driven towards a certain way, and then look for other things that somebody might need or somebody is struggling with, and then figuring out how you can solve their problems for them. So in a way, networking is like mini entrepreneurship, and every single person you're interacting with is like a business or startup, because first you're seeing what it is, like what kind of things can I offer to them, give without expectation of return, give lots of value to each person that you interact with, and then on top of that, be able to differentiate yourself, show how you are somebody valuable to them, and then on top of that, just sort of repeat the process pretty much, and the benefits will come back to you always.
I just wanted to unpack those few words that you mentioned. Firstly, it was like being a good storyteller and having that shared vision. So I just want you to elaborate more on that.
Mm-hmm. So actually, before I came to UMass, I was not very good at speaking at all. I was terrified of talking to new people. I didn't really know how to convey myself. And actually, it was when the president of the entrepreneurship club before me and Max, his name was Kunji, he came up to me one day and just started talking to me about the entrepreneurship club and invited me to join. And the entrepreneurship club was one of the 60 clubs that I had signed up for my freshman year, first semester. So I signed up for as many as I could, went to almost all of them. So I had 4 engineering classes, followed by 5 clubs that would go to one, leave one early to make it to another one a little bit late. But the way that, I guess, entrepreneurship club stood out was the way that the stories were told, both through like Kunji's charismatic speaking and also through the different speakers that were very well versed in communicating. I wanted to learn how to do that, to be able to tell a story, because with anything that happens, you can tell it in a way that inspires, a way that drives somebody towards an action, or you can say it in like a very dull way that would never be heard. So I think storytelling is at the base sort of like very key. And with the shared vision, it's because entrepreneurship and trying to make something happen isn't about any individual being really smart, because people can be as smart as they can be, but they won't really get anywhere without like teams of intelligent people or lots of great people surrounding them. And the only way to make that happen is to be able to tell a story that shares a common vision, where everybody knows exactly where they want to go, and then that way they can all work towards a common goal. Because one of the most difficult things between different smart people is that they always have very different, unique visions, and they're difficult to talk to, and they're difficult to figure out, because they all have that own thing that they want to do, and they don't really want to give in to somebody else's ideas.
So just trying to find that compromise between, everyone that you're working with must be, a feat in itself. But, you talked about how you really got involved within the UMass campus, with all the extracurricular activities and stuff. So you must have made a lot of connections through those. Have any of those helped you within your entrepreneurship journey?
Yeah, so I would say just in all the different clubs that I went to, I definitely attended a lot of events that were club exclusive, I guess. And it definitely opened me up to a lot of opportunities. So following my influencer marketing past, I guess, so going from an influencer, I had been having lots of brands reach out to me about sort of doing partnerships that I was declining because I didn't want to sell out, I guess. So I started doing marketing consulting, and then instead talking to them about how they could better talk to other influencers and bridge the gap between influencer and brands to figure that out. Also because I had a big network of influencer friends that were helping me build myself up already. So alongside that, I did that for a little bit, but going to like the UMass Marketing Club and joining some of their events was really helpful. For the UMass Entrepreneurship Club, one of the speakers had a startup that he was working on that was marketing and advertising and esports related. It was Polar Ace. And after the sort of presentation, I was really inspired, so I stayed after, talked to him about my experiences, pretty much just asked to see, like, shared my ideas on how I could help them, pretty much. And then I asked them to, like, grab food so I could explain some of my ideas. I did that, and then pretty much explained this whole outline of, like, a marketing strategy for them that I thought might be beneficial for their, like, new launch of a new branch in their company. And so after releasing that, I basically talked to him, and then he pretty much just hired me. He asked me how much I wanted to make, and I came up with a number, and he immediately said yes. And that was just like, oh, was that too little to ask for a month, I guess? And then so I quickly was like, in advance, and he was like, done. And 30 minutes after that conversation, I had that lump sum of money in my PayPal account, and I was wondering, like, how in the world did I get here? And following that, I took on multiple more marketing clients, and through that, it was a way that sort of also helped me get through college.
Awesome. That just goes on to show, like, how, like, when you're like going being out there talking about your experiences, so important. But I was just curious. You mentioned that before the start, like at the start of your college, like you were like not a very good storyteller. Like you weren't that used to talking to people. So were you like influencer before that, or did you become one after?
So I was like an online influencer, so I could like type and hide behind a screen, I guess.
Yeah, that's very interesting, isn't it?
But in person it was very different. I actually kept my like name, face, and identity out of my entire influencer online thing. So nobody in person pretty much knew anything about it. It was separate from like my town, people that I knew. I just mainly worked on it as like a project. It wasn't something like major to me, although I've been able to reap like the benefits, I guess. But after coming to college, I figured it's a new slate. I could make new friends, which was a challenging thought and idea to meet new people, because in high school, like, you know the same people for the last 12 years. So it's much different to be making new friends, I guess. But afterwards, I challenged myself by pushing myself out of my comfort zone. And because I was scared of talking to new people, I made myself a rule that I wasn't allowed to eat alone. So every time I went to one of the dining halls, I would challenge myself to either bring somebody if I could, and if not, then I had to sit down with somebody new, introduce myself, and get to know them over a meal. So I did that throughout the entirety of first semester.
Wow, so you're a beginning extrovert, really, and that's something that I know a lot of people as well, and there's just a few select people, you included, that have that quality to be able to just go out and make a new friend every day. But that seems extremely rewarding. Just making that connection is extremely crucial in this generation of people who are always on their phones. But you kind of did both aspects. You reach people through the screen and you reach people in person. So that's an interesting challenge that you did for yourself. How else did you reach out, like socially, just, not only for networking purposes, on a business term, but, just personally as well, to just like boost your confidence or something like that? How did you do that?
Mm-hmm. For confidence boosting, one of the things was going to career fairs, and then I guess it maybe sounds bad, but just like flexing, I guess. But in a way that you try to make yourself appear as, I guess,
you basically sell yourself.
Yeah. So it's like I went to my first career fair. It was an engineering career fair, and it was because our professor told everybody to go. So all of the freshmen, new majors pretty much went. And because of that, all of the people that were recruiting were pretty much just talking to mostly freshmen. So they were kind of annoyed with us asking like dumb questions and those kind of things, which was kind of, it led to them just automatically responding with like, oh, what year are you? And then as soon as you said you were a freshman, then you'd get shut down, and then they would tell you to reapply in a couple of years, which I came prepared and ready, and I had past like CNC machining experience that most people didn't have, and I probably could have landed an internship, but then because of the whole, like, I guess I felt discriminated against because of like my pretty much school year, I guess. Then I was never able to get my resume looked at. So when I went to the first marketing career fair, it was very different. We just all talked to each other. There was no resumes. There were just business cards. All the resumes were sent so that the recruiters could look them up afterwards, but it was mainly just like networking and chatting amongst each other. And I found that I was able to surprise a lot of people because, one, I was the only freshman there. Most of the people were juniors or seniors, some sophomores. And on top of that, I was the only mechanical engineering major because everybody else is doing marketing and taking marketing courses and doing all of these things. While instead I was able to bring up different clients that I was working for in marketing, and then influencer campaigns, and then all these things that people were sort of learning about in classes, but I was getting like real world experience out of. So sort of talking like that sort of helped build a lot of confidence in moving forwards, because it made me feel like I was more than equipped to take on whatever the future was. And following that, I guess, towards the end of my freshman year, getting my first full-time job offer was another really major thing that I felt like maybe I could do this. Like, at least I have this as like a bottom line sort of backup plan, I guess. But then I moved more from marketing towards entrepreneurship as I fell in love with the whole creating a company, growing your child, and moving forwards with that.
Yeah, this is very interesting. Like, I guess this like comes for an entrepreneur, like this decision of having a backup plan, of like having a safety net where you can fall off on like a job or an internship. On the other hand, they're also passionate about something and they want to work on it as well. Can you talk about like how, like, if someone were to go about doing that, like if someone's graduating, they have a job, but then also they want to work on something entrepreneurial, how can they go about it?
Mm-hmm. I think time management is really important. I mean, I'm still working on that. I'm still learning. I still need to improve a lot, and procrastinating is always a big issue. I'm sure lots of people can relate. But alongside that, I think having something that you're really interested in that you can sort of dive yourself into, where work doesn't feel like work and you can find yourself putting in the hours and only getting more and more excited as you progress forwards, is something that I think everybody really should have. There's a difference between like going after something that excites you in a way that you feel like this could be it, and although that thing may change and sometimes passions can dwindle, that doesn't mean that like going after it in the moment and going through one thing and the next, you can learn fast and you can really repeat through that process, and it's an incredible kind of learning experience.
That's pretty cool, because you talked about your different like startups that you had. Can you talk to us a little bit how those kind of like turned over, and just a little bit more about them, and did you learn anything from each one specifically, or?
So I tried to start a marketing agency type thing. A lot of it was just personalized client work also, but I did the Collegiate Summer Venture Program through UMass and Venture Valley Mentors, VVM, which was an absolutely incredible program. I recommend anybody look it up and then learn more about it. But I did this through the summer. It was like a huge interview process. It was there were 5 rounds of interviews, and I was interviewed by over 50 people. So it was like kind of really cool. But other teams that I thought would have gone in also did not, which I guess in a way made me feel like, one, it's just like, oh, I felt special to have made it, but then on the other hand, I wondered like if I should have been one of the teams to actually get through, because some of the other ones seemed to be, I guess, more further down the line or just more grandiose ideas, I guess. But I went on, I learned a lot through it. I took on lots of mentors through the times. Some of them taught me a lot of things. I did some marketing consulting through that afterwards. Made my first $120 an hour client, which was like a huge accomplishment for me, I think, because it was just a few years ago that I was asking for like 10, 12, like 10, making 10 times less, basically. So I was like 10xing myself in like a year or two, which is kind of crazy to think about, I guess. But going after that, I took on one of the biggest clients that I worked on. It was for some alumni out of Eisenberg and their marketing agency, and I helped their agency manage one of their clients for them. So I completely took over, and I was paid over like $50 an hour pretty much for the term of the project. And similarly to how a lot of the other like more later sort of marketing consulting clients that I took on, I got a lot of control, which is very different from early on. So it started out with me doing more like the minor marketing work, but then later on it's like I would get to have them hire a few people for me if I needed, to work on some of the minor related work. And also with this one I had pretty much unlimited whatever budget I wanted to spend, so I pretty much could run whatever ads I figured, deal with whatever influencers I wanted. And they had this huge project and they had made over $100,000 in the last quarter, so there was a lot to live up to pretty much. But I took over this marketing campaign, did really well, and in under 3 weeks of working with them, helped them generate over $200,000 in revenue, which was double their past quarter pretty much. So it was like a huge success. It was really, really great. They also offered me a job afterwards, but I continued with schooling because I wanted to still work on that. And this was also through winter break of the COVID year, which I guess fortunately I was able to pull myself together and sort of do a lot still. So I took 13 classes during COVID, really took advantage of the time, took advantage of the pass-fail classes, honestly.
Yeah.
But aside from that, I guess, I did a lot during winter break because I made myself a rule to not allow myself to overwhelm myself during like these sort of times. And I guess, so talking a bit about successes and failures, like people always hear about the successes, like all the competitions that like people have won, and then all these great things and successes that companies have done, but there's major failures and there's lots of highs and lows. And I guess I can proudly say that I've failed more than anybody else I know. I guess so. Through like past experience and almost getting like kicked out of the university through like academic probation and not doing very well, I had a very bad I guess second semester, going into like one of the low times, and out of the 4 classes that I took, I only was able to pass one of them. So through that time I had a 1.0 GPA. I was on academic probation. I needed to bring it above a 2.0 in order to even like stay as a student without getting kicked out. So there was all these things that I was struggling, and then I switched majors, I took on minors, and with this whole thing, I guess I had stopped going to classes and I was working a couple like full-time roles while taking classes. So I think that was a major thing. I made a rule not to work during those times anymore. So I quickly brought my GPA up. My GPA is now like a 3.8, 3.9 major GPA, which is pretty great. It was a big step up, I guess. But
that certainly took a dark turn. It was like,
oh, yeah.
okay, what?
Yeah.
No, it's crazy because I was able to, I don't know if anybody else I can say they 350% increase in their GPA,
Yeah.
after like an amount of time. So who knows, maybe that's a record. Somebody proved me wrong, I guess. But it's a big turnaround, definitely. And I really love the economics major, and it's been very broad and taught me a lot also about marketing, business, a very wide thing that's also given me a lot of time to pursue some passions and things like that.
So one thing I wanted to know was like, when you were failing like academically or professionally, like when do you realize that when something's not right for you? Was it like did you just because you got like academically were not doing well, you realize you had to shift majors, or professionally when you were during COVID, like when you're facing challenges but at the same time you're also failing on some other stuff, like when do you realize when you have to shift things, or you're not good at something, or you have to think about something new?
I think it's really when you hit rock bottom. It sounds bad. I've struggled a lot with mental health, and it's been very difficult for me, especially during COVID and even throughout. And working on all these projects and then trying to keep up, especially when you surround yourself with lots of really, really incredible people. I think it's like the more you do, the more like crazy like successful people you meet out there that are like making millions, and you're just like, why am I here between these people? Like it's like the higher you climb on the mountain, the more like giants you see in the distance sort of looming over you, and you're forever in their shadows, and it's almost like, oh, I missed one. I didn't know that people were doing this. Like I thought I was doing a lot. But then the more you know, I guess the more humbling it becomes, and I think that's something that I can appreciate a lot also. But after hitting rock bottom, I guess, or there's lots of these different lows that happen, and knowing how to get through them, I guess, is also like a struggle with mental health, which I feel like is becoming increasingly more and more like an important thing that people talk about, which I'm really glad. But coming up with positive coping mechanisms was really, really important to me. So I've always had a really addictive personality. So growing up, whatever it was that I would get into, I would like get really into, whether it was like a hobby, a sport, like a game or a TV show even. I'd like binge it until like pretty much just the self-control aspect, I guess, was difficult to learn. So I think coming up with certain like rules and principles to guide yourself and make yourself live by is very, very important. Another one of the important things that really helped me get through it was I would write letters to my future self. So I would send them to myself in like little email formats, and every single time I was like at one of those highs, like on top of the world, feeling like I'm living it, I would record that moment, jot that down, pretty much write all about it, be like, oh dear Alvin, like all these are happening, like I can't believe it, life feels amazing, just sharing all this and then just living in that moment. And then also at the same time, whenever I'm at absolute bottom, where I feel like there's no out, there's no light at the end of the tunnel, I would also write all of that, just share the feeling of absolute lack of hope, like there's no way out of this, like how am I even supposed to like live now that there's just no way, you know? And then after jotting these down over and over and over again, you almost get to become a little bit of a time traveler, because you can go back and read them and communicate with yourself as you're talking to yourself and see your past self asking you for advice, seeing yourself grow. And no matter where you are, if you're in like a high point or a low point, you can read about those past highs, see how great life has been, and live vicariously through yourself and relive those moments, and then feel that feeling of happiness. And then at the same time, you can go back to those lows, see how much you've struggled, be proud of yourself for what you've been able to endure and come out of, and realize that no matter how bad it gets, like how it feels like there's no hope and no light at the end of the tunnel, you can tell yourself all you want that it'll get better, but you feel like you're lying to yourself. But when you look back and see all of those highs and lows repeated back and forth and over again after each other, you know for a fact that you have proof that no matter what happens, everything will be okay. Because no matter how bad it gets, there will be more highs to follow.
Yeah, and especially in your case too, you have such a drastic comparison, definitely many highs and many lows. So I feel like it's so important living in the present and as college students, we're always looking for the future. We're like, what's my next step? What classes am I going to take? What job am I going to get? So, that's like the big thing on our mind, but I think it's so important to, be able to, in your case, understand your past, look for your future, and that's like a perfect balance to live in the present, because a lot of people sometimes, they do different things and they kind of forget about some things in the past. But I feel like having this, maybe it's a coping mechanism, but I think it's really beneficial to, write things down, take a picture, something that just kind of reminds you and refreshes you of what you've been through. And, it kind of validates your presence for you to live in the present. So I think it's important to have that range. But just also kind of talking about, you're an econ major now, but you're very much involved with Eisenberg, and, making that switch from your initial major into economics. Was that kind of, was it difficult for you, or was it kind of, like you kind of just fell right into it?
I kind of fell right into it. The economics major is really, really welcoming. I've really enjoyed all of the faculty, all of the professors, the classes that I've gotten to take. There's a very wide range of classes that you can like choose to take, which is also really great. I also became one of the economics peer advisors after being one of the academic diversity fellows for the College of Social and Behavioral Sciences. So for different shifts, I would have office hours, and pretty much I would advise current economics students on just all sorts of general things. And I guess it felt like a very welcoming, homey environment, and it was very sort of encouraging. So anybody who is I guess, interested in the major, I definitely recommend looking into it. But aside from that, Eisenberg has also been a very important, I guess, part of my college career, although I'm not an Eisenberg student. And I know a lot of people try to be or want to be, but I would say that it's not like an absolute necessary thing if you want to really go after whatever it is. Like, there's really nothing that's holding you back from doing all of these things anyway. So I was able to compete in pretty much all the Eisenberg competitions. I did the Eisenberg Inclusive Leadership Summit, made it to the semifinals and finals a few times, and then I did the Eisenberg Ethics competition, which I've won in the open division, first place in the last 3 years in a row. And I've also done lots of other different Eisenberg like leadership events, gone to like the Women of Eisenberg conference and all of these things, and I'm not a woman of Eisenberg, I guess. And I haven't been in a lot of those things, but you can still do those things. You can still talk to professors, you can still get very close relationships with them. I've taken a lot of upper level management classes, and have gotten very close to a lot of the professors also, which I really look up to a lot and have grown close with, some of which I've like gone out to dinner with a bunch, I just have their phone numbers that I could call and talk to them about things. And it's very nice to be able to be close with your professors, which is another thing that I recommend to a lot of students, to try to form those sort of things. And one of the easiest ways to do that, I think, is to talk to them after hours, like during office hours and those places where most students don't go. And then bringing in like passion projects that you're really interested in, like either like startup ideas that you want to do, research things that you wanted to look into, not just because you want research assistant on your resume, but because you're actually really interested in a subject. Explain why and share that passion with them, like through these interactions, and then that'll become apparent. And as you share this and then ask for things and then go for these things, then you'll find like some professors you just won't be able to meet with, they're too busy, or you won't find time, and that's okay too. But there's always going to be people out there that will really be intrigued by your willingness to learn, to search and go down this path of research and academia.
No, yeah, definitely. I guess that's true, because that's actually very easy. Your professors are always willing to talk. Not only professors, like you can easily go to the office hours, stay back, talk to them. And apart from that, like you have mentioned, like attending the Women of Eisenberg conference, like things like that, like attending a conference, like all these things are so accessible. Like you can easily attend, and like that's very easy to stand out, and like having that stigma, or like the thought of doing everything just for your resume or your profile should not be the case, and just doing just out of your interest and passion, I guess that's very important too. And like like how like in college, like even I used to have this like until last year, when I was like doing everything in keeping in mind for, okay, how can I build my profile, how can I build my resume, how can I apply for internship and stuff like that. But then you start to realize, okay, whatever you're doing, first you're not even interested in that, and secondly, like you're basically wasting your time chasing something that's not going to yield anything. Rather, you can just focus on whatever you're interested in and whatever you're passionate about.
Yeah, on top of that as well, I was doing some research the other day just for, a school project, and I saw this very interesting quote that kind of talked about, that pursuit, that personal pursuit, and you should have that every day. It should be like a growing, developing process. And it said that, if you're trying to obtain something, just because, maybe it's for your resume, yes, it's for you, but if you're just kind of doing that without your, that development, it almost kind of seems like an obligation, and you want to really have fun when you're doing it, because you're doing this for you. And, although, your resume is for you and stuff, you want to really embrace it. And I think that's a really important aspect that you talk about, having that passion, creating those opportunities, and, having those connections with your professors. They're also people. We've had a few professors come on and like just kind of talk about their experience. So getting that inside view from them, and I just think it's extremely important, not only just for like networking, but just like having that connection and having that kind of self-thought that you did this. I think that's very fulfilling.
Yeah. So I just wanted to hit upon like all your entrepreneurial projects or whatever the experiences that you have had, like they seem so seamless that it doesn't like it just feels like you just got into it just out of interest, and like they weren't like something big projects that you just started off with. Like they was just like you seamlessly went into it, and they were just part of your experiences. So could you just touch upon like how entrepreneurship could just be like a project or something that you can, if you're interested, you can just take upon it, and it isn't like a huge mountain to climb,
Yeah, like the famous quote, like the journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step. And the other metaphor comparison about how like a musician or like a very talented musician, when they first start to play, has absolutely no idea what they're doing. I guess just sort of taking that first step is really, really important, and just continue to push yourself and just take action, because I think that's one of the things that hinders people the most, and I think it's what, I guess, FOMO, like the fear of missing out, has driven me to do more often. In a good way, I've been able to leverage myself to utilize that to push myself to do more, but when you start taking action and then also not being deterred by failure, and taking failure more as like a welcoming sort of, like failure in itself is success. Like it's better to have tried and failed than to have never tried at all. And trying to sort of guide yourself into a healthy mindset that builds yourself towards what your idea of success is very important.
So, kind of talking upon that, you've, from managing your time, with all of the clubs and academics that you had before, and, the different opportunities that you had balancing school, talk about self-discipline. That must have been such a prevalent aspect for you, that you've definitely, like, worked to build for yourself. So how did you kind of establish that for yourself? Was it just kind of like self-challenges through different things, or was it really like you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, I think everyone's relationship with themselves is really, really important, and it's the first like major mountain to climb on your path to both success, whatever your dreams are, because the biggest hindrance to anything that you can achieve is going to be yourself. And because you have the widest range of potential. Everybody does, which means that every action that you take could lead to something, and it could go anywhere. And having like a good relationship with yourself is very important. I've struggled a lot with that. I've been always very, I guess, much of like somebody that didn't like to stay within the bounds, like always wanted to go outside, like do things that are sort of not, like I didn't want to be and like to be contained. But sometimes that is necessary to keep yourself on track, I think. But one of the things is one of the ways I did that was by guiding myself through like positive, negative, and neutral like coping mechanisms, which was something that was very personal to me that got me through a lot of it. So the way that it went is I would categorize all these like coping mechanisms that I would do in these three categories. So negative ones being like drugs, alcohol, or like anything, like that, gambling, anything along those lines. Neutral ones would be things that everyone does, they're good, but if you overdo them, they can be bad. Like for example, like binge eating, watching TV shows, playing games, anything like that pretty much. Or if you do it too much, it can become pretty negative, but you just need to keep it under control a little bit, which is the thing that I struggled with because of my like addictive personality. It was difficult to keep those under control. So I needed to focus on the positive ones. So the positive ones are things that even if you dive into it and go too far, I guess, it's still only going to be beneficial. So in a way, even if the idea behind it is wrong, you'll still benefit out of it. For example, working out, or like doing sports, playing music, art, reading, writing, going after like these projects, like academia, these kind of things. Because say you're doing it as like a negative way, or even like a lot of the time, like for me, working out or diving out of my comfort zones to like talk to new people, do things I'm terrified of, was really like a way of self-harm, to be honest. Like it's one of those things where like you feel unhappy with yourself and you want to like almost hurt yourself in some way, but choosing yourself to not do one of the negative ones and try not to fall into one of the neutral ones, and instead just pushing yourself into one of the positive ones, which may or may not be the best idea and may or may not work for everybody, but I guess it has worked for myself a little bit, which like diving into working out or like diving into something like that only like pushes you to become more disciplined, gives you more skills, gives you more routine, and sort of builds your character, I think.
It's so ironic that all these things that you have struggled with so much, you also have impressive clarity on them as well. What do you think, like, getting back to like the whole like influencer industry and your like entrepreneurship projects, like what do you think is kind of the going forward? What are your plans as an entrepreneur? Like, do you have any upcoming projects, or what is your view of like the influencers industry and as a whole, like right now or in the future?
So I stopped the whole influencer industry after I decided that I would not be taking money from, I guess, quote unquote fans, because I remember the first time there was someone who, she sent me money just to, I guess, support my dreams, I guess. And then I was like, what? And then there's people asking, they're like, oh, you should put out like some sort of sweatshirt brand or something, you know, one of those, I'll buy one of those to support you. And then I was just like, well, why would I do that? And then I was thinking to myself, like, oh, okay, I could do that, but then I'll get a bunch of stock and then sell the total of 3 shirts. And then, like, what am I actually doing here? Or it'll just be like, I don't want to take money from these people, you know? Like, I want to give to them, and I don't actually want to take at all. Even if I feel like I just didn't feel like I was actually giving them enough value in whatever it is that I was doing. Like, I felt like I was tricking them somehow. And this was a lot into my imposter syndrome, because I felt like I was fake famous. Because there was a period of time where, I think this was after I hit like the 55,000 Instagram follower time period, I was growing my Snapchat a lot, and I'll put air quotes again, interacting with fans. It just feels it just feels weird, because it doesn't feel like that at all. But there were times where people were like nervous and shaking that they were actually getting to talk to me, and then I was like, what?
Do you think this happens a lot with other influencers as well?
Yeah, no, it's weird, because you get these short bursts of things where people notice you or realize you from somewhere, and then you're just like, oh, that, and then on one hand, it secretly feels really, really good. But then also you're confused, and you're like, well, this isn't that. Like, I've had a lot of different crazy, interesting interactions and offers from people all around, like all these different random states. But when it came down to it, like, I didn't want to be taking money from these people, and I didn't want that to be a way of, then I would feel like I was living a life by tricking a group of people in order to giving me their money, and I would need to I was afraid to fall into this, like, after I would start taking money from people, then a lot of influencers start falling into this almost like system where it's just like, oh, now the point is no longer to pursue what it is that you're really interested in, but to try to keep that money still there, and to just, I guess, make it about that. And that's something I really didn't want to do, so that's why I went into the consulting thing, because I knew that I was giving value to businesses in a monetary sense, and they were giving that was like a very clear thing. So I'd never like to take anything out of anyone unless I feel like I know that I'm giving them more than I'm receiving. So that's another one of like the principles that I like to live by. But following that, the influencer industry is honestly very toxic. It's very difficult. It's very cutthroat. There's a lot of competition. It's very difficult to get yourself up, and everybody is trying to claw their way up. It feels like you're in a big like pool of quicksand with a bunch of other people, and you're all trying to survive, to keep staying relevant, even, I guess, before you just kind of get drowned out and then you get pretty much put back down. So that's not something that I wanted to do. Also with growing, as much as you get a lot of like positive fan appreciation type thing, and then people almost like falling into whatever the thing is that I don't know, whatever that thing is, there's also a lot of hate. There's people like saying racial slurs, people just sort of making almost like death threats. It gets crazy, and it's weird that people are like that, either from like envy or their own sort of unhappiness with themselves, especially because like like it almost makes sense in a way. Like they realize, like, I mean, there's nothing crazy special about me. I shouldn't be there. I don't deserve to be there anyways, it feels like. So it's just kind of upsetting to some. So with that whole thing, I didn't want to stay in that. And I guess towards the marketing side is something that I'm still like, I'll take clients from time to time probably and still do that just as like a side sort of hustle. But I've really honed in on more like tech startups that I started going into. More so the recent last two that I worked on, which was Interactiva Studios, which I had joined as a co-founder and then left. And then it was Rumir, which is the AI therapy startup that I was starting.
So finding the research for those, was that all like a one-man team? Did you ever have other people come help you, whether it was like through, funding or just having that group of people that can really help you in that one project?
Interactiva Studios, it was started by my friend also at the Entrepreneurship Club that I met, and it was Adrian. And Adrian was working on it beforehand with some other people, and they had a really, really cool presentation and a great project. So I started out by just helping them out, pretty much. I pitched at the UMass Seed pitch and won $4,000 of funding through second place, thanks to UMass Perfume Center and all the donors. And using that, and also we had gotten like a sizable chunk of money from our summer client, which we had taken on the Peoria Art Fair, so the idea of this startup that we were working on is like we were working on college tours and online virtual events. So standardly there are mostly like Google Maps Street View style click, teleport, drag, look around type things, but we felt like that wasn't engaging enough, and we wanted to create like an immersive environment that somebody could enter into and explore. So we used Unity to develop a video game like platform where people could enter in, walk around, and interact with their surroundings, and also would connect this to like VR, and this pretty much would integrate into a lot of what like the virtual reality and also the all of the metaverse type things are looking into. But we were creating a lot of things along that lines. We had close to like 10,000 attendees attend more of the events, and then we took on our first 12 interns during winter break of COVID year also this was, and that felt like a great imposter syndrome type thing, because one, this was a company that I didn't start out founding, like I joined as a co-founder. I was helping them with a lot of things and trying to organize and help everybody's doing all these things. I didn't do any of the technical side of things, which seems like the main thing of what like the company is, right? Here I am helping hire and interview 12 interns, some of which were older than me, doing software engineering roles and for like 3D design roles, and a lot of this was these were paid interns that we actually had as a legitimate company, and it felt weird, but also it was like a really cool experience, and I think it helped really with a lot of just sort of stepping up and moving on, and it was fairly successful with that whole thing. But then I ended up stepping down due to like other reasons, and also I was going back into classes as well as taking on a lot of other responsibilities from other things, and I shifted more towards working to my latest startup, Rumir, which I guess was a little bit, it's very far-fetched of an idea. It's very out there, and it's very deep tech startup related, so it's a lot of researching and developing new technologies that don't quite exist yet, which is also really thrilling to me. I think I've moved a lot from like shallow tech, just small business end of things, into developing new tech startups, which is more like the dream of being able to create something completely new and affect the world with it.
But do you think like all the like generally in startups, like you think okay, nowadays everything is like application based, or you're thinking like the technical part of it is so important to build out some sort of a startup, but I guess don't you think your role, like the kind of roles that you play in startups like that, are also equally important?
Yeah, so with pretty much startups, I guess the role of the entrepreneur, which I feel like I at least the form that I've taken is more like the connector. somebody that's able to like tell the stories, find the different talented people, and then also being a really strong like people's person, which is also why I took a psych minor at UMass. I'm really fascinated by people ever since just talking to and interacting with a lot of people, because it's so interesting to me to see what people are passionate about, what people's dreams are, what they're interested in, and trying to help them find that, seeing what their strengths are, seeing where their potential could be, and also where their weaknesses are, and then trying to guide them towards their strengths, and then having other people's strengths sort of cover their weaknesses, and then forming these teams and groups where they all have this shared vision that I'm also molding into is the same way that they reach their sort of potential. So with this, it's almost like I'm selling the dream of people achieving their dreams and then being able to fulfill their potential by helping create this product, which would then create something new that I would become like a major part of, I guess.
Yeah, that's really cool because, now in the business world we talk a lot about before kind of like everyone kind of coming into a team having the same mindset. But now everyone's really having those specialized roles, and highlighting those strengths and weaknesses within a team is extremely important. And having somebody like you come in and help that team just be the best that it can be, I feel like is such like a really important thing. And so I can see that you've done it for yourself between like, the relationships you have with people, whether it's like your professors or your mentors. But do you have any, you definitely have had a long journey, but do you have any like mentors that are like you still keep in contact with, like since like the very beginning? Like, is there anybody that's been able to see your growth, not just you, but, just kind of follow you along this journey?
So I guess that honestly reminds me I should be better a little bit about reaching back out to. It's something that I tell other people, but is still very, very important. But I have very good like people that have had very good people around, both through like different presenters or people that I've met at different conferences, at the club for speaker events, like people through like the collegiate summer venture program, other people that I've interacted with. And not only is it really important to find people that are like a little bit further ahead than me and like older that I can learn from, it's also really, really inspiring and helpful to talk to like younger people or people that I feel like were like me pretty much, because seeing them grow reminds me of myself, and it inspires me to continue to push forwards, and also reminds me why like I'm doing what I'm doing. Like it reiterates the goals. And I think goal setting is also very important, that I also need to work on a little bit more, which you really need to know like what it is that you want. Trying to identify what do you want, how, like why do you want it, pretty much, like the reasoning why. And then you can also do the 5 whys exercise to figure out like what you're really trying to get at, which is like an entrepreneurial kind of exercise where you keep asking yourself, why do you want this? Why do you want this? Why? And then eventually you get down to the basic kind of bottom line. And then finally, you need to know like what are you willing to do, sacrifice, or work at in order to get it. Because once you know of its importance and what you're willing to do, then you have a very clear guideline of what you can put into towards it, and then that's half the battle, I guess.
Yeah, coming back to that like why concept, little kids all the time ask their parents why, and it kind of gets me thinking that having that open mindset of just being able to, question anything, I feel like is really important, because, in that, development of the question, you want to figure out why. And so having that question for yourself all the time, it feels really important for that self-developmental process. And so we can definitely see that you yourself have definitely come far from that, coming from your freshman year to your senior year now, right?
Mm-hmm.
So looking towards the future, it must be pretty bittersweet looking back, but you're on the verge of such greater and better things. Anything for the future that you have planned?
I guess just continuing to explore and see how things go. I have lots of projects on the back burners that I will continue working on, and then probably look into potentially some product management related roles in the meantime for tech startup related. Although I'm not like fully certain or solid where things will go, I'm excited to see where I guess everything is going to end up, and it's definitely a crazy bittersweet moment because just seeing the club grow, seeing each of you grow, honestly, seeing everything being passed down the lines and everything progressing forwards, makes me feel a little bit old, but also it's crazy because I feel like every semester that I've had gets by it's like exponentially faster, and I just can't believe because I don't even, it feels like I am just finishing my freshman year, and now here I am. Finishing it out, done with all my classes. I just have some final projects and essays to do, and then I'm on my way.
Yeah, I definitely think that, people in general just kind of say, those are the best 4 years of your life. But to kind of conclude, we asked this one question to, everyone we have here. And what would you recommend? What would be a piece of advice that you would give for budding entrepreneurs?
I think some of the most important things is to branch out to new things in order to open yourself up to potential, because that's where like you start building luck, I guess, if that's a way you want to phrase it, because like letting yourself, like stepping into new events and then taking the step that other people don't take, like for example going to the event and then talking to that one person, or researching this person beforehand, seeing what it is that they do, and then ask them a specific targeted question, or coming up with an idea and sharing it with these people and then asking them for advice. All of these little things, because then that's like the start of sort of planting these seeds that'll grow into something into the future. And then on top of that, the importance of I guess communicating with other people and surrounding yourself with other good people, because the average of the 5 people that you spend the time most is pretty much what you're going to become, and you always want to surround yourself with people that you find you admire in certain ways, and by surrounding yourself with those kinds of people, then you're sort of building yourself up towards success. And then also by like joining things like the entrepreneurship club, talking to these kinds of people, it opens you up to other people that are not only having ideas, but try to surround yourself with people that are taking action on ideas, because taking action is like addictive, I think, because when you're around people that are all doing something, you can't not do something anymore. That's why I would do homework at the library, because when everybody else is working, it would get me to do work instead of when I'm sitting in bed. So I guess surrounding yourself by other people that are doing and taking action and have things that you want to learn after is the way to go.
All right, well, thank you so much for coming on and talking to us. Once again, this is the Club Entrepreneur Podcast.